Welcome to AstroChat with Anne Sundell, Kimberly Williams, and Monika Anna. We are three professional astrologers living in three separate countries, coming together every new and full moon to share our 3 points of view on astrology. Whether you enjoy deep dives into the current transits or you are just beginning to learn about astrology for the first time, there is a place for you here. All that is required is an appreciation for astrology, along with a respect for the various traditions within it. So grab a mug of coffee, your favorite cup of tea, or any other beverage of your choice, and join us for a chat on the astrology of the next 2 weeks. Hi, everybody. Welcome back to another week of our AstroChat podcast. Missed everybody with the last lunation. The three of us just could not get our schedules to coincide, but we are back again to talk about the upcoming new moon and eclipse that is happening on October 14th. Before we jump into looking at that, just a quick reminder, if you haven't already done so, please subscribe, hit those buttons below or above, wherever it is on your computer or phone or laptop. It helps us a lot when people subscribe, helps our channel, helps us to be able to do more and bring you more content. And since we do come out once every 2 weeks, give or take, feel free to hit the notification bell if you want to be notified the next time we come out. All right, so let's just talk about what we're going to be looking at today. We are dealing with the annular solar eclipse, i.e. new moon in Libra. It'll be happening at 21 degrees, 7 minutes of Libra on October 14th. Here in the central time zone of the United States, it'll be in the afternoon at 12:55. Across the pond over in the UK, we're looking at the evening at 6:55 p.m. And in Finland, that would be 8:55 p.m. or if you're on military time, 20:55. So feel free to convert that out to wherever you live and your time zone. It'll be exciting to see all of the different comments and different people's impressions of what's happening. So we're going to spend a large portion of today talking about the eclipse and those aspects. And there are some things happening in the next 2 weeks between this eclipse on the 14th and the next full moon, which, by the way, will also be a lunar eclipse, but we'll talk about that in our next podcast, happening on October 28th. So from the 14th to the 28th of October is our focus. During this time, some changes, things that are happening, transits that you might want to look at. Mercury will ingress into Scorpio on either the 21st or the 22nd of the month, depending on where you live. And just before that, you're going to see Mercury cazimi the sun on the 19th in those last few degrees of Libra. We're also going to see that right after Mercury goes into Scorpio, the sun will be following on her heels on the 23rd going in. And I think that's really, we don't have a lot of shifts or changes because so much went retrograde last month and either has just come out but hasn't gained a lot of traction in terms of speed or is still retrograde. Monika, how many planets did we say we have retrograde on this particular chart?
4 planets plus Chiron.
Yeah, so 4 or 5 energies there. So there's still a whole lot of going within and taking a look at it. We are going to start off with our Sabian symbol. And of course, today it is myself, Kimberly Williams, and my cohort, Monika Anna, and Anne Sundell, who has introduced or reinvigorated our interest, if you will, on Sabian symbols, can't be with us. So I'm going to bring that forward. So, of course, we're looking at 22 Libra for the Sabian symbol, because with Sabian symbols, once you get past 0 minutes into that degree, we're moving to the next point. That's why the Sabian symbols have 30 points for each of the signs, each there. So 22 Libra is a child giving birds a drink from a fountain. I love that. It's so beautiful and peaceful. And this idea of giving with love, with joy, giving to others feels very Libran to me. this idea of small charitable acts of kindness. I often think about the motto of, practice random acts of kindness. That is a theme across the globe. It really speaks to me here. And it just feels very lovely, this idea of giving and caring for and nurturing others. One of the challenges with that can also be perhaps stepping into a place of wanting perhaps some notice or recognition for our small acts, or feeling like our small acts are perhaps big, huge acts that we feeling very charitable from those things that we're doing. So I think the key here is to give for the sake of giving rather than for any other kind of motive or ulterior things that could be there. What do you think, Monica? What do you go when you hear this idea of feeding the birds water?
I mean, that when you said that, first time we spoke about this symbol, I just had this picture of that beautiful idyllic painting, when there's just like the birds and the bees, and there's this lovely fountain and like a little cherub maybe somewhere. So it felt very very Venusian, very kind of beautiful, very like it's the Arcadia. It's this kind of, the land of everything is hunky-dory, everything is beautiful, or, the land of Lego, everything is awesome. Um, but it does it knowing what I know about looking at this chart and knowing obviously that this is an eclipse, it feels very paradoxical, isn't it? Because we have this beautiful scene about this lovely Venusian energy, lovely energy of just doing something out of the goodness of our heart, looking at those little creatures that, they can't really say thank you, they can't really, pay you back, so you're not looking at the business exchange. I'll do this for you so you can do this for me. This is just feeding the birds, doing something for the nature, connecting with the nature, connecting with that part of you that just feels joy by, being part of something bigger, being part of nature. I think maybe that's why I have this picture of this kind of idyllic painting, because that idea behind those scenes was very much connecting with the nature, with the soul of the world, with the anima mundi. And on that level, knowing that, there is a joy and there is a beauty to be found there. So I'm just thinking, I like how when we'll unpack this chart on this in this episode, how that feeds into the whole idea of an eclipse being on this degree. But yeah, it's a lovely scene of, can we connect in a world that is so oriented on the individual, of being the winner, their only winner in the losers, all that messaging that we're getting, that you have to strive to be the best, that you always have to have a goal and development and growth. Actually taking sit back and being in a garden and feeding the birds and doing those tiny little acts of kindness that no one might notice but you. How does that actually fit? How does that bring that balance into your life, into the world? Yeah, there's something beautiful and magical about that.
It definitely is. And it feels very Libran. So how about taking us off into talking about a Libra
The new
new
moon.
moon before we dive into the eclipse?
Yeah. So uh Libra new moon, we always have the new moon around the autumn equinox. So the autumn equinox happens when the sun moves to Libra, and we have the equinox where the light or the day and the darkness, the night, is even. That's the one of the two times in the year when the day and the night are of equal length, and then we're slipping into the darkness. So on Libra equinox, in the northern hemisphere, we slip into the dark side of the year. From this day, from the moment the sun enters Libra, the days are getting shorter and the nights are getting longer. So that new moon in Libra, for me, again, it brings always that idea of the balance. We're just coming out from the Virgo season, which again is all about the harvest. Libra energy brings that idea of harvest into how do I balance that? How do I share my harvest? How do I celebrate it with others? Libra energy for me, it's very much about for the first 6 archetypes from Aries to Virgo, we learn a lot about ourselves and who we are and what we want, and that kind of Libra Aries polarity. Aries is all about me and my ego and my body and who I am. And then we're going into the next 6 archetypes, which are about others, meeting others in different circumstances, in different archetypes. And Libra is this first archetype when we encounter the other. So it's this kind of idea of balancing between what is me, where are my boundaries, very much Aries, the opposition, very much my Mars. No, I don't want that, no, this is my boundary, this is my space, this is my consent. But also we're balancing, all the me, myself, and I with I want to be with that person, whoever that person is. That might be my best friend, that might be my lover, that might be my partner, that one might be my friend. If I want to be with others, there is always an element of compromise. And again, it's like the Libra is asking us when and how we're compromising. If we're going too much, like the pendulum, if we're going too much into compromise, we're forgetting about ourselves. We're losing ourselves. We're getting overwhelmed. We're getting bullied. We're getting to the point where we're doing too much to please the others, forgetting about ourselves. We're giving off from the empty cup, as the saying goes. When we swing the pendulum into the other side and it's all about me and my needs and what I want and what I'm getting out of that, well, there probably not going to be any relationship around that, because that's very narcissistic approach, right? This is very much like me, myself, and I, and what can you do for me? That's not a healthy relationship either. So Libra invites us to that playing with that balance. Where is it? And personally, I don't believe that relationships are 50-50 all the time. Sometimes relationships are 80-20. Sometimes the relationships are 75-35. It's about what and how we're willing to communicate and balance between us. Sometimes your partner might be feeling a bit under the weather. They might be literally physically ill. You're handling most of the chores, most of the responsibilities. You're not going to say to someone who's literally with flu in bed, well, you haven't done 50% of your house chores. You wouldn't do that. But then again, it's that kind of balance, give and take. If you're unwell, you would expect the same compassion and kindness shown towards you and someone helping you out. So I think Libra is very much the sign when we, for the first time, walking that zodiac archetypal path, for the first time we encounter the other, and we're asking ourselves those questions. What is it that it's me? What is it, or who is it that it's you? How do we meet? And how do we connect on that path? So, and coming again in this side of the year, especially in the northern hemisphere, after the season of harvest, for me, it's like, actually, this is the moment when with the others, we share the bounty of the harvest. We share the bounty of, and again, by the harvest, I don't just mean going onto the fields or into the orchard, but the bounty of everything in our lives. This is the time when we can share our wisdom, our learning, the everything that we've gathered and harvested in our lives, and we can share that with others. And I'll just pause here because I could talk about Libra for a bit.
Yeah. Yeah. I love how you mentioned that Libra is that first point after we go through the first 6 signs of the zodiac that we're hitting what's beyond me, what's on the other side, right? And I always think about Libra as not so much relationships as relating. It is the sign to me that is the other. Who is the other? What do I want from others? What do others want from me? How do others see me? How do I see them? Who am I when I step into relationship, which can be very different from who I am by myself? I mean, we see this all the time where knowing who I am is one thing. Being true to myself while I am in relationship with another person and their expectations and all of that interaction, that can be another thing completely. So it really feels like this time of year and this sign of the zodiac both are opening a door where we can step through and discover more about ourselves and what we bring to the table when we step out of ourself, out of that Aries side, and step into the how do I connect? How do I share this with others? And the other thing that I think is really interesting is to always look at the sign that precedes and follows, because the zodiac's not a line continuum. It is a circle, right? It for a reason that everything builds on what preceded and feeds what follows, and so it goes round and round, right? And in Virgo, we're really kind of trying to discern and figure out what has quality. And in Scorpio, that follows, we are often very focused on what do I need to release, shed, surrender, let go of. And so here's this point in the middle of, well, what is it that brings quality? What are the relationships? Who are the people? Where is there, something that I can learn from, that I can give? Who are the birds that I am going to give water to? What water will I provide from that fountain that we were talking about? But also, what is not of quality? Where are the relationships that have some toxicity or heaviness, or that served me but no longer serve, or that I served but no longer can? And so there's that, that idea of, like you said, the scales and this balance that I think is so key when it comes to the people in our lives. Bless you.
Thank you.
The other thing is, that idea of the scales, and I know I've said this before a lot, but I'll say it again. I feel like first time that I was learning astrology, they said to me, Libra's the scales, and its motto is I balance. And I thought to myself, oh, I got that. But I would probably paraphrase that now and say, Libra's motto is I am balancing. Somebody told me one time that balance is not a noun, it is a verb. It is an act that is constantly in motion. We don't have, if things are completely even, 50-50, and they stay that way, we have static. We have no motion, we have no interaction. And if we're going to be in relationships, we have to interact. And so, like you were saying, sometimes it's 80-20 in a relationship, but then at some point it swings the other way. If things are constantly going back and forth with some kind of flow, then we are balancing. And instead of jumping from one side of the scale to the other to try to get that static equal 50-50 zone, we can step off the scales and be in the middle and be the fulcrum. And I think the highest vibration of Libra is that peace, centeredness, standing in the center, seeing both sides of something and understanding where there needs to be give and where there needs to be take, and when we need to allow things to be out of balance, because that's part of what it will take to come back into alignment. And this is why I think Libra's such a powerful sign when it comes to the arts of mediation and helping others with conflict resolution. Not conflict with me, but conflict out there, of being able to kind of see the whole equation, the bigger picture, and see what is needed for people's interactions to bring everyone back into this idea of balance, alignment, centeredness. And for me, I think that's one of the things I love the most about Libra energy is I always find this time of year, I'm usually doing some of that work in some area of my life about where have I lost my centeredness, my sense of peace? How do I regain that? Who are the people who can help me with that? How do we get back into this feeling that, things are slowly moving up and down gently with ease, rather than, I don't want it to be chaotic, left, right, or imbalanced for forever, but just that being in the flow, right? Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting what you mentioned about again other people. I love this saying. I don't know how true that is, because I think that's literally just becoming now an internet meme. But the idea of you being a sum of 5 people, of qualities and characters of 5 people around you that you spend the most time with. And I think there is something to it. The idea of even in my own language, we have this saying that you become the person that you surround yourself with. So the idea again in Libra that we think we know who we are, and then we meet the other, and we are being reflected in their eyes, like in a mirror. And I was like, actually, am I really that nice? Or maybe I'm not so nice. Or, do I really think that I'm organized if my friend's calling me a whirlwind? Like you're getting reflected back, and you have this moment that you can actually use as a quality moment to reflect back and say, actually, am I really who I think I am? Are my qualities, my characters, my values, are they coming through the way I want them to? Or actually, I'm not perceived the way I want to be perceived. Because people see, different qualities of me. And again, the idea of who am I surrounding myself with? If I'm surrounding myself with certain types of people, um, am I actually being like them? Am I absorbing the way of thinking, the way of being, the way of existing in the world? So I've heard, so many people saying, oh, I'm not like that. Well, they're your friends. There is something that you have to have in common. Otherwise, you wouldn't be attracted to them. Otherwise, you wouldn't spend time. You have to have some kind of, again, very Libra, common ground. So the idea for me, that Libra time, going into Scorpio, to my favorite seasons, October, November, it's the idea of being reflected in my relationships. Like you say, it's the way of relating, and seeing as well, seeing that Aries side, my ego side. Am I who I think I am? And again, with everything that we say here, there's a grain of salt, or that we need to take with all the advice, because not everyone will reflect things. People also project stuff on you, and there's again this balancing act. Are they perceiving me I want them to be, I want to come across? Or are they just projecting their own stuff onto me? Because but then again, if they do, they might have found the hook. So what is it that that gives them that hook in me? It's a really interesting sign. I think Libra is always there's few signs of the zodiac that I consider very gentle and very kind of, but I think there's this strength quality to Libra that sometimes is very overlooked. To be in the middle of that balancing act, to stand in between two armies, two fighting friends, two fighting parents. To be in that middle takes a lot of courage and a lot of strength, and to be in that position of mediating, to understand one side and say, yes, I hear you, and then go and yes, I hear you, and then being able to find a common ground for them so they can start communicating, they can start seeing, where they have potentially things to relate, and not necessarily the things that could pull them apart. That is incredible position of strength. And I think, very often that's overlooked in Libra, because they might be seen, sometimes we looked at Libra, and especially at the air signs, as too airy. They don't get grounded. They're not serious. They kind of flighty. They're here, there, and everywhere. They're each other, everyone's friend. But actually, it takes incredible strength and incredible courage to get out of your own comfort zone and go to someone else and say, okay, I want to hear your opinion. I want to see where is it that you're coming from, so I can understand that, so I can help mediate the conflict, create the resolution, and bring balance, bring harmony. This is what Libra do. I balancing, like you say, I bring harmony
Yeah.
into places and people and situations that are disharmonious. That's not even a word.
I think we should be able to make up our own words. I like it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I make my own words all the time. That's the beauty of being a foreigner. I just made things up. But ultimately, that's how the language is changing as well. So, but yeah, I think people understand what I'm saying. I hope they do.
Yeah.
But that's the beauty and strength in Libra, bringing that harmony into places where there is a discord.
Yeah. Yeah.
And this Libra new moon is bringing that strength and bringing those qualities with the punch of an eclipse. So on this new moon, we have an eclipse, and it is a solar eclipse, which means the moon will be going in front of the sun's face. So if you're lucky to be in a path, lucky or unlucky, depending how you think about it, but if you're lucky or unlucky to be in the path of the eclipse, you would be able to see the moon eclipsing the sun, swallowing the sun, and eclipsing the light of the sun at this new moon. And interestingly enough, as well, there are two types of eclipse, as we know. There are solar and lunar. So moon going in front of the sun and taking away the sun's light, or sun, or the earth shadow going in front of the moon, on top of the moon, and taking the moon's light. That's the lunar eclipse. But we also have distinction between the eclipse happening at the south node of the moon, or the eclipse happening at the north node of the moon. And I always kind of look at that in a chart, because that also gives a separate quality to that eclipse. So this one is happening at the south node, and south node is about releasing. It's about holding on to stuff that you no longer need. It's about literally getting rid of things are no longer needed there. So it can be about ending, and about abrupt ending, and about cutting things away that needs to be cut away.
Yeah. It's interesting that in so many cultures, there's so many myths and folk tales about eclipses that go back millennia. And the majority of them seem to be, not that I'm a historian and can say for sure, but the ones I've come across, the majority always seem to be about creation and destruction tales. There's in India, there's the tale about, the god, or now demon, right? At one point, the demon Rahu, who was given so much power, and as a result, through that journey tale, as a result, the head became separated from the body, and now that head chases the sun, the moon, and every once in a while catches and swallows them, but because there's no body, cannot contain them, and so they pass through. You have in Asia, there's some tales about a toad that has swallowed the sun and has to be cajoled into releasing it back, and just numerous cultures that go on and on about these really fascinating tales. And I was wondering to myself, I was reflecting on, why is it always like creation and destruction that seem to be at the core of these stories? And I thought to myself, well, that just makes sense, because as we know, like with everything that brings change, there has to be the destruction of the old for the birth of the new, right? That's part of the process of transformation. We cannot step into what we are becoming without releasing some of what we have been. And I feel like that's endemic of every eclipse. And with this one, as you were mentioning, being on the south node, a south node eclipse versus a north node eclipse, there is that, what have I been? And so I think there's a lot of recognizing what has served, going back to that Libra concept, what has served, but it's time to step to the other side, and what will be if we stay only in our comfort zone, which is often how I think of the south node. What I have done, what I have known, where I have been, the things that perhaps worked really well, the strengths that I've built, the things that didn't work well, the hangups that I'm still caught up in, those, round and round we go scenarios, all of that. If we only stay there in what we know, we'll never become what we could be. And so there is that needing to separate, needing to let go. But for me, with the caveat of also owning, what are the strengths I have as a result? I find a lot of times when we're dealing with challenges around our south node, it can feel like either I stay where I was or I let it go. But it isn't necessarily an either or. How about I don't continue to operate as the person I was? I value the strengths those experiences have given me. I mean, we talk all the time when we're in Scorpio mode and we're talking about that theme. We talk all the time about how this trauma gave somebody this compassion, and now they're able to do this skill as a result. We see that pattern, that pathway of transformation, I think, more clearly, right? Not that everything always requires something painful to lead to something beautiful, but when that is the arc, it's just so apparent. We can see it. It's not always so apparent when it's this, I'm trying to be both myself and caring for others. I'm trying to be both concerned with others and with myself. I'm trying to hold the balance. And how do we hold the balance around the South Node is the honoring that this is who I have been. This is where I have gifts. I get to choose if I will use them rather than being caught up in them. And I think the thing with the South Node is it hooks us into the pattern, especially when we're dealing with the South Node currently being in Libra. Who are the people that help hook you into keeping the pattern going? This would be that scenario of, well, in the family dynamic, I was always the mediator and didn't get to have a voice, let's say, hypothetically. Who are the people I'm choosing to surround myself with? You know, do I value that I have gifts as a mediator and I go for a job or career, or I bring that forward when I feel I need to? Or every time I sense tension and conflict, do I step in and have to do that? Are we doing it unconsciously out of a habitual pattern, which I think is the danger with the South Node? Are we doing this consciously because we have chosen to recognize this is what's come from my experiences, and now I use it when it suits me and when I choose to step into it? And that, I think, is the gift of the South Node. And for me, the hardest thing with the South Node is getting clarity about what is habit, what is the gift, when do I get to use, what do I need to release, how much do I keep and carry with me into the future, because it's often so emotional. Who I have been, the people I have been with that have made me that way. That's very personal, that's very emotional. And often some of the patterns that we haven't been able to move beyond yet are patterns we've done over and over in many emotional, close to the heart kind of scenarios. So it can feel often much more intense than it would appear to people on the outside, because they don't have those inner feelings that they're not carrying that, for lack of another word, that past with them. We are. Those are our footsteps that have walked this trail.
And lucky for us, we just begin with this pair of eclipses. So eclipses come in pairs, obviously in the opposite. So this is Libra. We had on April 20th, we had a previous eclipse in Aries. So they all come in, in pairs. We had the Aries eclipse on the 20th of April. That's when we began another 2 year of eclipses in this sign. And the last one will be, I'm just looking here, the last one will be actually in Aries in March of 2025. So we have a whole of this year left. We have the next year and until March 2025 to get to know Aries and Libra polarity and eclipses. So I'll probably repeat that tip at the end of this, but the tip for you: have a look in your chart. Where is the sign of Aries and where is the sign of Libra in your chart, and whether or not you have any planets in that space, if you have nodes in that space, or if you have any angles in that space. If you do, chances are those eclipses will be more prominent in your life than in lives of people around you who might not have any sensitive points in those signs. So eclipses bring change. For me, to kind of summarize eclipses at that high level, they always bring change, they always shift something. With all those stories and myths and fairy tales that you're talking about, with those mythical, magical, godlike creatures swallowing the sun, and then then giving it back to us. There is something transformative, there is something changing. And for me, eclipses, they do bring changes and shifts, both at the level of society. If we pay attention, those are obviously big changes. There are 2 year cycles, so 2 year for a shift. But also on a personal level, if they are sensitive points in their chart and eclipses fall around them, there is something that's changing and shifting around that. So this particular one, which is the South Node in Libra, if you have any any planets or any angles around 19 of Libra to let's say 23 of Libra, or the same 19 to 23 of Aries, or of Capricorn and Cancer. Chances are you will feel this eclipse. You will feel the need to release, to let go, to cut cords, especially around themes of relationships. I'm not saying that suddenly relationships will break and, I don't know, you'll leave your partner, or you'll break up. But there will be a shift around the way you relate, or the people that you relate to. There will be the need of reviewing and revising of who is around you, and whether or not they bring balance and harmony to your life, or they're bringing discord. And if they do, is this a time of letting it go, of cutting that cord, of letting it go, and just moving on?
Yeah. So well said. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Fortunately, this is a solar eclipse. I feel like lunar eclipses often invariably are more emotional and involve a lot of endings. Solar eclipses often, because it's happening on a new moon, it it encapsulates everything you just said, and also at the same time, it's like there's a reason for that. What are we stepping into? Right?
Yeah.
There's something often being that needs to be born, that cannot be born unless we cut those cords. But it's not just about the release, it's about, becoming untethered, cut the cord, let that anchor go so that we can step into what is coming forward. I kind of think too we should talk a little before we go into the actual chart. We should just talk a little about kind of the astrological points of view of what eclipses mean in terms of how do we work with them, because there's been questions. The last few episodes we did around eclipses, this was a question that kept coming up. And if I'm good, I will put in the comments when this goes out which episodes we've talked about eclipses before with some timestamps so that you can go back and review if you like. But generally, it really, when I first got into astrology, it always astonished me, kind of the negative attitude that many astrologers have around eclipse time. The precautions, the dangers, what you need to avoid and do. As a pagan, it was like, eclipse, it's great, it's beautiful, everything is changing, yay. Um, power, excitement. And that is certainly true, but also there's this, eclipses are about change. And as a result, things are very unpredictable. There's something about eclipse season, whether you define that season as while the sun is within 18 degrees, the sun of a new moon or the sun of a full moon is within 18 degrees of a node. Some people say the season is the week of the eclipse. I've read other astrologers say the season is the month or the month before, a month after. So I don't think we have a universal definition of what eclipse season is. But however you define eclipse season, when we're in it, things don't go by the normal norm. There's a unknown. There's things can be different, dangerous, unpredictable. I mean, let's face it, if you're having a solar eclipse in the middle of the afternoon and suddenly the moon swallows the sun and it goes dark, and if you haven't been present for a solar eclipse, I highly encourage you to seek out, work in your travel plans to be somewhere in your lifetime where you are experiencing that solar eclipse. The sun goes out, the sky becomes dark, the stars come out, the birds stop singing, the temperature drops 20 or more degrees. It is unnatural, right? I can understand why in ancient times this was an omen of, doom and gloom. It doesn't feel normal. It's beautiful and it's exciting, but it's not normal. And during this time, things don't behave necessarily. The planets, the transits, your life doesn't behave in the normal pattern. So the unexpected can happen. Bad things can happen. Illness can take sudden turns. it is not surprising that there are many branches of astrology, certainly not all, but many, that talk about eclipses with a bit of a having a malefic influence.
Mhm.
How do you work with eclipses, Monica? Is it a hide in the house and don't go out, or pull down the energies
Pretty
of the sun?
much. Pretty much. So I think I'm very much subscriber to not necessarily doom and gloom, but I think I've said that on the previous episode. I do not work with the eclipse energy because it's unpredictable, and because ultimately whenever we work with something, whether it's the new moon energy or or the solar energy on your birthday, you work with the light. At the eclipse, by default, there is no light. So that energy of the light, of the life giving force, like without the sun there would be no life on earth. That energy is literally eclipsed, and like you say, the temperature drops, the nature goes quiet. So the normal process of the nature of the birds, and animals, that all changes because the light that feeds us is no longer there. So personally, I think I've mentioned that in the previous episodes, I don't work with eclipse. I work with the new moon. I set my intention. For example, I work with with the new moon, with the full moon. I might be working with releasing things or celebrating things, right? When it comes to eclipse, I am, instead of telling universe what I want, in terms of like, oh, that's my affirmation, that's my new moon things, I am actually allowing space to listen. This is one-off event. It doesn't happen, obviously it happens quite regularly across the world. We don't feel it because it might not be happening above our heads in the world. Obviously in a chart we can see that it's happening. So we have those eclipses in at least 4 in a year. um but those are the times when, for me, the universe takes away that light and resets the stuff behind the scene before it spits it out again. So it's that moment of that primordial chaos where things are brewing. And I think, for, again, this is not astrology, so I just want to make sure that we kind of disconnecting the astrology and actually my personal path that I'm on. The way I work with eclipse is very much I allow and listen, like the universe, to present me with that chaos, to present me with what is coming up, to present me with that the options, the crossroads. For me, eclipse very often are the crossroads. It's like, someone's leading you to the crossroad and you then have a choice between going left or going right. Not necessarily in political terms. But this is the moment. So as much as in any other times, I'm trying to proactively engage and communicate and co-create with the universe. At the eclipse, I take the back seat. I try to listen and hear and see what is it that is brewing in this big cauldron behind the scenes.
Yeah.
And what are those mythical, mythological, godlike creatures that just swallow the sun above my head? What are they brewing behind the scenes, and what are they going to spit out in terms of the new destiny, the new path, the crossroads presented?
Yeah.
So yeah.
Same
And I
here.
think, again, talking about Libra, right? It's that balance. If we always tell the universe what we want, whether it's the new moon setting up or manifestation, there's so much out there about that. I want to manifest, this, that, and the other, and I need to set up my intention, and I need to do my affirmation, and it's all, quite valid. But if we always going out, when do we have time to go in? When do we have time to actually listen to what universe has planned for us? If we're always saying to the universe, I want this and I want to go that path, I always fear that there is this beautiful saying, watch out what you wish for, because you might get it.
Yeah.
You might say to universe, I want to manifest that, and it will. But you'd never actually allow universe to say, hey, I actually built this beautiful other path for you, but you never gave me a chance to present that path to you.
Right. I see this as a perfect time for us to make space to receive and to see what has been unseen. If the South Node, as we were just referencing, is about my past, let me see what has previously been unseen, what I was not able to see about
Yeah.
that past, and then we can take action and go forward to create change. So it's a very powerful, palpable kind of time. And for those living in the United States, it's also exciting because it's happening here. So
Yeah.
I believe, as many astrologers do, that you feel the effects of an eclipse because that eclipse is impacting your chart, regardless of where we live.
Hmm.
However, if you are living in a place, a country, a nation that is experiencing the path of totality, the visible eclipse, it affects not only you, but it's affecting your country's chart, your nation, those, the weather, the politics. So these things can exponentially apply not only to our individual selves, but to our societies and collective selves. And this one will hit, I believe it starts out in the Pacific. It comes into the continental United States around Oregon, goes through the west, through New Mexico kind of area, will come into
Hmm.
Texas, and then goes down, hits the Yucatan of Mexico, hits part of the Gulf of Mexico, the Yucatan, and then Central and South America will have the kind of the path of visibility. So
Mm.
if you are living in one of these places, as I am, it should be very exciting to see what materializes for us with our collective governments, as well as us with our own individuality. All right, on that exciting note, let's pull up the chart and get into some of the astrology of what we see in this lunation, eclipse and otherwise. Give
Sure.
me 1 second to pull it up. All right, so here you go. Monica, why don't you start us off with some of the lunar aspects?
So the biggest lunar aspect that we have is Mercury creeping in right behind that solar eclipse. And yeah, 17 degrees of Libra. And Mercury, as you said, Mercury will be Kazimi only a few days after this eclipse, after this new moon. So and also on the day of the eclipse, Mercury is opposing Chiron. So to me, this aspect really reads as we're talking about relationship, Libra, and we're talking about relating and communicating and trying to find a balance. And part of the finding balance is communication and understanding someone else's point of view, understanding where they're coming from, communicating our needs, our desires, our boundaries as well, communicating our consent, or communicating literally the word no. And in this big soup of new moon eclipse kind of energy, chaotic energy, we have Mercury that might not be actually very well heard, because not only is Mercury kind of being eclipsed, I'm going to use that word, eclipsed by the sun, by the energy of the sun, because it's so close to it we can't actually see Mercury on the in the sky anymore, but it's also opposing the asteroid Chiron, which is the representation of our wounding. And Chiron in Aries is that kind of wounding that we feel that really might not have a place to might not be able to be healed. This is the place where it's full of suffering and full of grief, that we need time to just be in that darkness, in that healing process, and in that sadness, to get it out, to get, to scream out if you need to scream it out loud. So it's really interesting combination, especially, like I said, at the time of the eclipse, at the time of um South Node in Libra, letting things go, cutting cords, cutting those relationships that no longer serve us, cutting um the partnership and friendships and relationships that are not bringing harmony, that creating discord, that creating, overwhelming that overwhelm us, that adding up to that sense of alienation that Chiron in Aries can feel. And Mercury, that should be helping us communicate that and bringing, again, when it comes to mediation, communication is key. Mercury should be the key in that mediation, helping understand two point of view. In this chart, Mercury doesn't really have that impact because it's not visible. It's hidden, and again, to use that word, it's eclipsed by the beams of the sun. So until it will be cazimi at the heart of the sun, and then it will appear in the sky again, we have that moment of not being able to maybe express the pain that we feel, express the wounding that we feel in the constructive way, in a way that make the people that we want to communicate to understand us, instead of pitying us, or feeling sorry for us, or not understanding us, and treating us like a victim. Sometimes we're trying to communicate the pain so other people can understand where we're coming from, why we are who we are. The pain and the trauma shapes us as well. And there is a depth of understanding that we can get from that. But if that is misunderstood, if that Mercury is not quite active, that can be then portrayed as, victimization, as self-sacrificing, as just, feeling needy, so to speak. So in this chart, on that new moon, I feel like this is the moment of, this is the new lunation that starts with us having troubles, getting the message across and bringing that understanding and communicating with words and with
Yeah. And I agree.
what
I
do you
think
think?
that the ability to find the words to articulate our pain, our suffering, our loss has been very challenging. Sometimes just finding words in general, not even about pain. I mean, you and I were talking earlier about, the challenges lately of, just trying to communicate basic, things can be difficult, right? At least in my world, they sure have been. And ever since this past summer, when the nodal axis shifted and we started to bring in this North Node and Aries energy, it seems to me that so many of us are in this period of recognizing I'm not pursuing what I want. I've lost myself in some aspect area of life, doing some soul searching about, what is the path I want to be on. And that can bring up things like, am I being selfish? And yada, yada, yada. Down the rabbit hole we go with the questioning, because this is a society, if you're in the Western world anyway, these are societies that don't really encourage self-knowledge, self-awareness, doing what suits you. It's much more about do what we've been conditioned to do what society says is okay. And so I think there's a lot of pain that we get to work on during this 2-year period. And of course, here we have Chiron in Aries. So I would say, with this lunation, where have I been lost in this partnership? Be it the relationship, be it business, be it a conversation, and just kind of allow yourself to just be in the discovery, self-discovery of where am I not bringing all of myself forward? Doesn't mean we have to act on it. Just that kind of, as we were saying earlier with eclipses, I don't need to direct this energy. I need to just allow myself to make space to see what has been unseen. And I feel like in that moment of Kazemi on the 19th, when Mercury is at the center of the sun, as it were, that's often a moment of insight. That can be a day in which we suddenly get the aha if we've been asking ourselves the question and just allowing it to percolate. We can often have that brilliance of insight in the center of the storm. Doesn't mean we know how to articulate it either, but we can see what we didn't see. And perhaps on the other side, after Mercury comes out of the beams of the sun on the other side, it may be easier to at least know what I want to speak to or speak about, rather than just kind of being in this muck. So I think patience
Yeah.
can be a virtue here, and also very healing.
Well, there's another element that I'd like to add that just came up as you were talking about. And the key is the word eclipse. Things can be eclipsed. There is a difference between an eclipse energy and a retrograde planet energy. Retrograde planet just drag us back through the same path. So we're going forward. We think we've done everything else. And then retrograde comes in. It's like, no, you have to go back and check. So it's like if you're writing a book, you have to go back and edit that book. If you did your homework, you might have to go and revise that homework. If you're on a project, the project might have to stop and you have to revise, your timeline. So the retrograde energy just takes you back on the path that you've already been through to help you revise that again, so you know that when you actually go forward, this time you kind of cross the T's, dot the I's, and everything is going forward. With the eclipse energy, the key is in the name. Things are getting eclipsed, things are getting invisible. There's something going on behind the scenes. And this is how I kind of feel about eclipse energy. I mean, it's interesting as well. Like for me, it's always interesting to know. I think there's more intriguing and interesting when the eclipse is in Scorpio, because then it's really stuff from the background that's coming up. But even with Libra and Aries, there might be something about relationships or even about yourself with Aries that is not yet visible. Something is hidden. And again, with Mercury being there, it might be that something has not been spoken, or it has been spoken, but you're not aware of what's been said behind your back. So there might be an element of that hidden message, hidden things in relationships. And again, when I mean relationships, not just partnerships, it might be business partnership, that there is a messaging going on behind the scene that you might not be aware of because it's being eclipsed. Or you might even hear the message, but when we just sometimes say, like I tend to say that I've been eclipsed because I just did not absorb that information. It's like something was between me and the person that was delivering that information. It was just like, it was like a screen. Like I know they said something, I heard the words, it just did not land. And I think with the eclipse, there is something about things brewing behind the scene that we can't see. They're invisible. There is no light in that. So again, have a look into the area of life that is indicated in the chart by Libra, in your personal chart, to see where there might be some messaging or information behind the scene going on.
Yeah. Yeah. And then there's another interesting set of aspects, right, involving Venus and Mars, their relationship with each other, but also with Saturn. So let's unpack that a little bit. So I'm going to start with Mars, because I feel like Mars has the strength in this triad, right? Mars is just entered Scorpio, which is the sign it is the traditional ruler of before we had discovered Pluto. So traditional ruler of Scorpio. And it is making a lovely water trine to Saturn hanging over at 0 of Pisces. So although it's always challenging, I think, for Scorpio and Saturn to try to work together. Right? In traditional times, they were the two malefics. They tend to each brings its own set of challenges, and putting them together can be challenging. And even though it's a trine, it doesn't mean it's good. It means that energy is flowing. So there's a bit of I'm always, when I think of Scorpio trining Saturn, I always have this flashback to the very first time I learned to drive a stick shift. And for those of you who don't drive a stick shift, there's this whole, like, your brain is used to a gas and a brake pedal, and now we've got a clutch, and it's a whole stop, starts. And so there's this whole kind of, it can be real jerky in the beginning, and you don't want to stall out, and you're trying to go, but you got to stop. And heaven forbid you hit a hill, or you have to stop on a hill, right? Then it compounds the issue. And that's the way it feels to me. The energy of Mars wants me to go. The energy of Saturn is slowing me down, often throwing an obstacle, telling me I need to stop and think about it. But once the rhythm is set and I learn how to work them together, which can happen, I believe, in a trine, I start to learn that I need to take action. But I also have to moderate my action so that it will get me to my goal. I have to maybe have committed action or sustained action. It isn't I'm going to pull an all-nighter and I'm going to get this done. It's I'm now committing to the long haul of the next 12 months. So a lot of times with this trine, it's like we're stepping into something that will require sustained effort, but it can still bring great results. Yay. And then we have Mars making a nice sextile to Venus always feels good to me when they're working in harmony, because Venus of what I desire is on board, is on the same page with the part of me that wants to go get it. So this is what I'm desiring it. I'm going to go get it. But here's the catch. Venus is in her fall in Virgo, and she's opposite that Saturn. So I think this is saying to me, there's some energy here which could be, I'm ready to go. I'm ready to go get it. I'm ready to go. I'm ready to get out there. I'm ready to take action. I'm busy taking action to overcome the obstacles I perceive, instead of recognizing that perhaps the delay, the obstacle, the thing that is slowing me down is forcing me to make some time to receive this information, to perceive what needs to change, to really get in touch with that Virgoan energy of discerning. Is this really the direction I want to be committed to? Am I going to 6 months in say, oh, what did I commit to? Am I looking at everything? If I decide, for example, to start a new career track or to take a new course, do I have the money? Is this the school that I want to go to? Maybe there are other factors that need to be considered. Maybe I need to see the bigger picture before I move forward. In other words, let's not get on that Libra bandwagon of jumping from one scale to the other and setting the up and down chaos in motion. Let's give time where time is needed. Saturn, give time to being excited and motivated and start taking actions, but maybe some baby steps towards where we want to go, rather than rushing in where angels fear to tread, which is a saying I often associate with Mars. And especially when Mars is in Scorpio, we may feel like there's a fight to win or a fight for survival. And that fight or flight kind of energy can really put us into triggering habitual patterns based on the past, not on the present, right? Because that's South Node in Libra. So I just feel like here, the thing that maybe we need to strengthen and develop is that Venus. What do I desire? Have I really taken time to think about, what am I desiring? Why am I desiring it? Going back to our Sabian symbol, which birds do I want to water? Where do I want to get the water? I can bring my thermos over, or I can go find a fountain. Maybe there's birds at the fountain versus here. Like, in other words, ask those questions of discernment about, is this really filling me and nurturing me? And is this allowing me to give and to nurture others the way I desire? Or is it just what I'm feeling called or pressured or programmed to do?
I'm smiling because of the stick. It's to translate from American English to a British English. Stick is a manual gearbox. So for those who didn't know what the stick might be, I mean,
translation
always makes me smile. It always makes me smile. And I work with people in US and Canada a lot who speak the same language, and yet there is just so much difference there. So, and I agree. I mean, there is something different to driving a manual gearbox, to driving a car with the manual gearbox. And what I love what you said about Saturn and Mars, and I have this picture. When I first drive to learn a car, back when I was 17, many moons ago, I learned actually on the manual car. So I didn't drive an automatic until very recently. But manual car, you have 3 pedals, right? You have the gear, you have the gas, and obviously you have your a brake. And the idea, my teacher used to take me to that hill. It was just quiet hill in a quiet neighborhood, but it was pretty steep hill, which means if you didn't have the balance, and I'm using the words on purpose, if you didn't have the balance between the brake and the gas just right, something wasn't working. So if you didn't have the brake and you were just working with your gears and a gas, you would roll back the hill. So by the time the gas would actually kick in, you would roll back because the brake wasn't protecting you from that. If you had the brake and not enough gas, again, the car would just switch itself off because you're having the brake but not enough gas. So it was that delicate balance of working out, I need to hold the brake until I have enough gas to move me forward, and
Yeah.
then gently releasing the brake and moving forward. And I feel like this is the dance between Saturn and Mercury. No one likes that I think that dance, it's not the most comfortable dance. People do say, I've heard so many astrologers saying that, Mars and Saturn is very much like hitting a brakes and a gas at the same time. But I don't think it's at the same time. It's very much, I love this analogy, and
Yeah.
Kimberly, I'll be stealing that. This
Yeah.
analogy actually being on the hill. If you don't find the balance, you either roll down the hill, which can cause accident, or your car will switch off because you have not enough gas and the engine doesn't kick into gear. So you have to find that balance between when do I need to hold the brake because it's safe for me to do so before the gear takes me forward, and when is it okay to release the brake because I have enough gas in my in my engine to actually move forward. And that's such a beautiful analogy. I absolutely love it. And yeah, I think between those two planets, again being in a water sign, um and in being in trying to one another, this is very much the question. When talking again, going back to, this is the new moon in Libra, so the whole new cycle that starts has that Libra undertone. So those two planets will be working with that, with that undertone of balance, of harmony. How do I, the question would be, how do I find that balance between trying to go too quick, too deep, too sharp, it's Scorpio, too intense, too obsessive. And how much is that, what? I need to pull back. I need to slow down. I need to be mature in my expression of my emotions. Saturn in Pisces. I need to be mature in my and master my emotion, the internal chaos, my spirituality. How do I balance those two? How do I, not put too much dampness and too much brakes onto what I'm trying to do, but also not go so quick um, that I'll run out of steam, or I won't be able to start because that energy is not quite there. And again, like you say, bringing Venus into this mix. Venus is like this, for me, it's like the supporting agent. It's like it's still asking about, is all of that of service? Is all that, that trine energy that we're doing, the Saturn and Mars energy, is that of service? Is that beneficial? Is that bringing value?
Or are we just spinning our wheels, to use a car analogy?
Oh my God.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, that is a brilliant analogy. Yeah.
Yeah. So lots to look at, lots of energy happening.
Yeah.
Any final thoughts?
Talking, yes.
Yeah.
Sorry. Now
Go,
the
go.
cars are stuck in my head, Kimberly. Eclipse, it's like the blind spot on the motorway. You know that blind spot when you're driving that you can't quite see. The retrograde planet, and we have 4 planets in this chart that are retrograde, and we've spoken about them, so we're probably not going to be touching on them today. But retrograde planets are very much the planets, you're driving and they're driving forward, but they seem to be moving backwards because you're quicker, right? So there's
Yep.
this like, oh yeah, haha, I'm quicker on the motorway, right? The eclipse is that, huge, I don't know, truck that is just out of reach. You can feel it, you can sense it,
Yeah.
that there is something big, but you can't see it in this mirror, you can't see it in the mirror unless you actually turn around and kind of see for yourself. But
Yep.
then that prevents you from looking forward and causing another accident. So eclipse energy, I mean, that, and we're on fire today with those. But that's very much it. You're driving, in a middle lane, and you can sense this huge, powerful engine,
Yeah.
somewhere close, but you can't see it quite there yet because it's eclipse, because it's in that blind spot.
Yeah.
And this is how, that's the best expression that I can, or explanation that I can have about eclipses. There is something big. There is this big engine. There is this big, big car, big energy that can throw you off your lane. And that's what I'm talking about, those um changing lanes or having crossroad. If you see that truck, that truck can literally push you off the road into another lane, into another road, right? Because of the sheer volume and power of that. But you can't quite see it when it's hidden. And the eclipse is very much like something is brewing, but you can't quite see it yet.
Yeah.
So I think that's enough of car analogies. Next time, we'll be back next time with sports.
That's great. And I'm just going to throw out there for anyone who has watched prior podcasts with us or listened in, when we talked about eclipses, Anne mentioned in our last one, I think it was last April, and possibly before that, eclipses tend to follow the Saros cycle. They have numbers, they sometimes repeat. So if you want, go back and listen to that. If you already have, you may want to look up the Saros number and see what's that. I'm sure that when we get to our next podcast in 2 weeks to talk about the lunar eclipse, we'll be mentioning that again. So stay tuned for that. But I think we're probably at time for tips and tricks before we sign off.
I mean, we've given few tips during the course of this episode, but there's one that I wanted to go back to. Well, actually, two. One, do find your chart. Have a look where Libra is in your chart. Is it in a 7th house? Is it in a 3rd house? Is it in an 11th? Have a look which house Libra is, because that's where the eclipse will be happening. And that's when that energy will be prominent in your life. So houses are the area of life. And if you find the Libra in your house and you know which house it is, check which area of life is represented by that chart, because that's where that energy will be brewing. That's when something might be eclipsed. That's when that chaos, that change will be happening. And the other thing I would say, if again, I don't recommend doing any rituals specific or setting up intention. That's just personal ritual for me. What I tend to do is journal. What I tend to do is, like I said, I try to listen to the universe. So with the Libra new moon and with the Libra eclipse, I would be asking myself question, where and how my life feels out of balance, where in my life I'm missing harmony. And just asking myself, is my health a bit out of balance? Is my relationship with my partner not as harmonious as I'd like? Is my work life relationship a bit skewed and not quite 50-50, but more like 90-10? So just having that reflection and looking at, where is it that I'm out of balance? I might be able to reflect over the next few weeks until the next new moon and say, actually, with the new moon in Scorpio, I'll be able to take actions on that and go intensely into fixing that.
Beautiful. Mine is so similar, but not surprising, right? So every time there's an eclipse, this is what I do. I look at, as you mentioned, I look at the house in my chart where the eclipse is happening and think about the themes, the events, the people, what does that house represent, regardless of whether that house has planets or is an empty house. It's still, what is that house about? And then I ask myself two very poignant questions. First is, what change do I feel called to step into here? And then the second question is, what pattern do I need to change to take the next step into it? I don't feel that a change from an eclipse is something that often happens overnight, although it can. There can be eclipses that hit our charts in such a way they do. Often it's the eclipses happen in a pair of signs over about a 2-year period, so that we have opportunities to lean in and lean in and lean in a little bit more to make that change a reality. So what is that first step? What do I need to change to take that first step towards the change I feel called to make? And quite honestly, usually I don't have to give too much thought to that first question, because there's something that the universe is calling. There's something part of me that is already saying, I want to change blah. I want to, make blah happen. XYZ needs to happen now. It's kind of very close to the surface. it takes a long time for me to sit with that second question of identifying what is the pattern, especially when we're dealing with a south node involved in the eclipse. What is the pattern I need to change to make change happen? So I wish everybody a lot of luck in pondering all these exciting questions from us and getting through the next couple of weeks of eclipse season. And we'll be back before the 28th of October to talk about the upcoming blood moon lunar eclipse. So see you all then. Thank you for joining us in this week's AstroChat. We hope that you enjoyed the discussion and would love to hear about anything that resonated with you. Keep the conversation going by posting shareable content on our Instagram, Facebook, or YouTube pages. You can also email us at astrochatpodcast@gmail.com. AstroChat is uploaded every 2 weeks on the Saturday before each new and full moon. Look for us on your favorite podcast platform as well as on YouTube. You can support AstroChat and receive exclusive content by donating on our Patreon page. We look forward to chatting with you all again at the next lunation of the moon.